Bom dia para quem é de bom dia, boa noite para quem é de boa noite, boa tarde para quem acabou de receber a notificação e veio aqui no YouTube assistir mais um podcast Mayhem. E hoje a gente vai estar com um convidado mega especial, vindo direto do Canadá. Frater RC vai falar para a gente sobre como é que funcionam as coisas do outro lado do mundo. Mas antes disso, você precisa ligar aqui as legendas e aí vir aqui para o lado e colocar Translate to Portuguese. E aí o YouTube vai legendar para vocês. And now I'm speaking English. So tonight we'll have a very special guest from Canada, and Frater RC. What does RC stands for, first of all?
It stands for Rumpens Catane, and Frater, of course, means brother in Latin. But Rumpens Catane was the magical motto that was scribed from my higher self, or the Akashic records, or whatever you want to consider that to be, by the adept who had chose to let me into the Golden Dawn in 1996 when I was 15. And it was a tough process. And he was named Very Honored Frater Ka, and I'd never found out what Ka stood for, but he's now become famous as the magician Nineveh Shadrach. I only got to study with him for a short time before I moved to Vienna to do a student exchange with the Waldorf School, Rudolf Steiner Schule. And when I came back, he had left the order and passed off Temple Tahuti, number 13 in Vancouver, Canada, to the two adepts he had trained. So, but he gave me that motto, and that was a tradition in our order that the adept or initiating hierophant would scry the motto for the outer order candidate for their journey through the lesser alchemical circulation of the 5 elements. And then during the portal grade, during the 9 months or longer that the magician is in portal, gaining knowledge and conversation with their holy guardian angel, they would then, from the HGA, get their inner order motto themselves. A lot of orders, like my friend's order, Frater Yeshi's order, they have a conversation with the candidate before they join, and they come up with a motto sort of together, and the candidate gets to choose, which is also a fine way to do it. But I do think it's cool, at least once in your life, to have a motto that's given to you as a lesson, because, you know, it's so tempting in spirituality and in magic and occultism especially to just play dress up, right? Play dress up and come up with grand titles and names for ourselves. So Rumpens Katane, more or less, means broken of chains. And Nineveh Shadrach is an Arabic adept and magician and wrote all the great books on jinn magic that we have. And he runs his own colleges and schools as well. I don't know where he lives in the world anymore, but it means broken of chains. So he would have scribed the name and gotten the meaning broken of chains and then put it into Latin. And he actually had Latin as a knowledge. So the name is actually conjugated right. But most of the times, like even when I was Hierophant, I wouldn't conjugate properly. And one of the adepts that I trained gave a really good argument for why he thought it was cool to have improper Latin conjugations for the magical mottos that we gave students. And sometimes they were in Hebrew or Greek. I would often give mottos out and translate them into Aramaic because I know it. And well, I used to know it well, but now I know it okay. And he said that by having the improper conjugations, it makes the mottos more unique, more like a real name, because it's probably only just you that has this English phrase rendered into broken Latin or faulty Latin, so it makes it more special. And I like that.
It is very nice. And you're from Canada. We're introducing you to the Brazilian people here because we're now getting guys from foreigners. And first of all, how is everything in Canada now that you're locked down like here in Brazil? Because here we have this event that was the symposium, and since we couldn't make the physical stuff, they asked me and Breno and Roberto to interview all the lecturers. But we are not YouTubers, so we're trying to make something out of it. And then we mostly kind of ashamed and kind of embarrassing, but okay, in the end, everything works. But how's everything in Canada? Not for the mystical world, but in the everyday world before we start?
Well, I mean, the government, since COVID, I was in the States when COVID started at the Temple of Isis in Sonoma County, California. Um, I was teaching there for 14 months for 14 months, including the pandemic, and then it shut down. And everyone in Canada has been getting, like, if you needed it, the government's been giving everyone like $2,000 a month, but I missed out on that. So a lot of people have been doing good. All my friends in the film industry, while they weren't working, they just had all this money and just ran around and played and were on Tinder the whole time. So I think most of the people I know were either, if they weren't married with kids, were just running around having a fun time. And I kept myself sane by creating another podcast and making my teaching online more substantial and taking it more seriously, because I'm experienced in teaching in person, but teaching online, I think, is new to a lot of people, unless you're Tony Robbins or something. The internet's the future, and I think education should be online. I spend a lot of my time listening to theological lectures from Yale University and Harvard, and how cool is that to be able to listen to 3-hour lectures every day from Yale or Harvard, and for free on YouTube. I think the future is perhaps good in the long run, bad in the short term.
That's it. In Brazil, we are still locked down. We have a shitty president, and the politics here are very bad in this.
Very bad.
Well, but let's talk about magic. And the first question that we usually ask to our guests is, how did you begin? How was your journey towards magic? We talk a lot about true will, and what drives you. How did you start it, and how did you came to this?
Well, my first real powerful magical experience was where I first heard or felt the presence really seriously of the divine, was in 1988 or 89, when I was initiated at my first formal initiatory ceremony into the Chakravarcharya yogic tradition by my close friend of the family, who's now then became my godfather later on. And his name was Mark, and that he took me into a room. My mom drove me downtown and took me into a room at for the Yogic Transcendental Meditation Society, and did this ceremony with incense and the pictures of the gurus, Maharishi, and gave me my first meditation motto. And during that ceremony, I had a very strong sense of other presences. And I was 7 years old, which is normal if you grow up in a TM, Transcendental Meditation family. That's what usually around when you start meditating is around 7. Of course, from childhood, I'd been sitting there watching my parents meditate for 2 hours every day, doing the yogic flying and the bouncing, and they would practice the siddhis because they had done the advanced training. And that was just a normal part of my life. And then when I was 10, I got to do the adult initiation and practice the adult meditation. So by the age of 12, 13, I had been practicing meditation daily for 5 years, which is strange. That's not normal. And I found that out in kindergarten and preschool when I'd go to friends' houses and be like, don't we have to meditate now? It's 3 o'clock. Isn't it meditation time? And, I didn't go back to those houses again. I was a weird meditation kid because I had hippie parents that, they were vegans who didn't drink or smoke. And my dad would just write ballads about Bilbo Baggins. And they were hippies they were not the non-drug, they were the spiritual ascetic hippie types who it was a cool upbringing. And then when I was 6, they put me in Waldorf school. So Rudolf Steiner's Waldorf and anthroposophical education is based on Rosicrucian and Hermetic principles. So by the time I was growing up and in grade 7, I had another spiritual awakening on a summer vacation, staring at a forest fire that was dangerously close and massive. It's quite a famous one in Canada. And the next day I just woke up with this revelation that this had to be my life, occultism, and I pursued Druidry and Wicca after that, and practiced very diligently. I read most of the occult books over the next 3-4 years by the age of 15 that I could get my hands on. And it was something that my mother encouraged, because my parents were divorced by then, and I was quite depressed, like dangerously depressed. People were very worried about me. And so I turned to magic and Wicca and Druidry and spirituality in an effort to save my own life. And I needed meaning. I didn't know what the point was. And there was a lot of abuse going on as well that you know, I'll let you imagine that. And it really did. It did save my life. And by the age of 15, I had worked through Don Michael Craig's Modern Magic and everything else that I could get my hands on. And I was like, okay, it's too much information. I don't know how to view it all. I need a way to view it all. So I bit the bullet and tried to join this Golden Dawn temple and order, which was a very large one and got even bigger. It's the largest that has ever existed. It's gone now, but it was quite a large group, which gave it the advantages of having many people to interact with, which I think is the best thing you can get in any educational environment. Is the more people, the better in a lot of ways. The downside of that is the more people, the more bullshit and human being problems that come with it. But the upside is you learn a lot very quickly, because when you're in a temple with 100 active members that's active 24/7, you know, anytime someone learns something, they don't keep it until they're ready to write a special book where they reveal what they know. They tell everyone what they've experienced or practiced or read or learned, and everyone tries it or talks about it. And so you very quickly, within this pressure cooker of knowledge and hermetically sealed alembic of magically fiery forces, you just learn and grow and are challenged. You have to face real life problems and find spiritual and worldly solutions for them. It's an incredible environment. And so my 7 years in the Golden Dawn, going through the 7 grades of the traditional order format, which ends in 5=6 in Tiferet, in the solar initiation. Mather's Golden Dawn didn't really go beyond that, though he did write a bit. That's well debated on the websites and the podcasts and the Facebooks. I try and stay away from that sort of stuff, but even Aaron Leach is fed up with Facebook, apparently. He's like, I'm done with it. I'm done with it. And it's like, yeah, you probably spent too much time on it anyway. So that was the journey. And while I was an adept then and Hierophant, running initiations and teaching and running Temple Tahuti and then later the other Canadian groups, we actually had a Brazilian temple. We had the Sanctuary of Kepra in Brazil. And so one year in LA at one of our conferences for the order, the 2 magicians from Brazil came up, and one of them, they had handmade from wood a beautiful Enochian chess set. And me and Frater, very honored Frater BT, played it for the first time. We did Enochian chess, and the Brazilian magicians and members told us how to do it. And because we really didn't know, we were both new adepti at the time. And so we sat there in the hills of California, of Orange County, playing Enochian chess made by this wonderful Brazilian couple. And it was a beautiful set. And that was a special experience. And I wish I had seen those people again. The sad thing,
you remember their names? I probably have interviewed them.
Yeah, I wish. If I mean, maybe they'll see this and say hello, because they were both very beautiful people, and I really appreciate getting to know them, as I did most of the people I've met in doing this work. So yeah, yeah. And then I continued. I went to seminary, finished my Master's of Divinity at the University of British Columbia, and then moved on to doctoral studies in Europe with Nicholas Goodrick Clark at the University of Exeter. Well, through their doctoral program in Western esotericism, but I didn't finish it by the time he died in 2012. Unfortunately, he had a sudden death, and the whole department shut down. And yeah, so I joined a band. I also worked in board and card game design for a few years, and designed a strategy board game and a party card game called Kill the Hippies.
Oh my God. I have designed a party card game, but it was called Small Churches, Big Business. It was about to have to play
Small church is
evil.
big business. That's
Small
great.
churches, big business. But the fact that it was a card game that was based on reality. So it was mostly absurd stuff that they sell here in Brazil. I don't know, in Canada, I showed it to some Norwegian people and guys from Europe, and they say, I don't believe this. You're inventing that. And I said, no, this is real. It happens here. And it was mostly absurdity, but it was all real. I bet magicians are similar everywhere. You know?
Yeah.
So the main reason why we found your podcast, we'll talk about that later, is that you spent a lot of time talking about the Rosicrucian mysteries. And in this world of chaos magician and easy fix, we call it fast food magic. You go to great depths to explain how it's hard work. And the first question that I have for you is, in your opinion, what is magic? And then we'll go to this fast food magic versus hard work magic. But the first question would be, what's your point of view? Based on your studies and the Waldorf and all that you have told us, what's magic to you?
If I sometimes like to summarize it in the most mystical way possible with one word. And so I would say that magic is breathing. And there's a lot of Kabbalah and alchemy and theory that is wrapped up in that. Not to mention, actually, now that I think of it, in the neophyte initiation of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the key letter that is questioned and repeated by the three major officers is the letter H, and it represents breath. So the circulation, the Ouroboros, right? And that cycle up and down the middle pillar, up and down the Nehushtan, up the serpent of wisdom and down the lightning flash. This is breath. This is breathing, right? That's why so many mystical traditions focus on breathing. So what is magic? Magic is breathing, and maybe it's just breathing better. Yeah, I don't think it has much to do with science or art, though art and science have something to do with it.
But breathing is everything. If you don't breathe, you're not alive anymore, and magic makes you alive.
And if you think about what breathing does to allow us to live, how crucial it is, it's very similar, like Rudolf Steiner says, to how plants breathe, which is through photosynthesis of the sun. And Steiner spends a lot of time comparing the development of the human being over the ages of spiritual evolution to the development of the plant. One of my favorite images is the idea of that seed. And within the seed is contained the germinal root of the next stage of growth. But around that is also a shell. And then that germinates and grows again. And around that is a really beautiful way of seeing it. And you could imagine that expanding out like 30 times. And what do you have then? You have the 30 rings of the Enochian ethers that initiate us into ultimate consciousness.
Oh, yes. You have studied in a Waldorf school, and Steiner as a Rosicrucian practitioner. Here in Brazil, we only know him from anthroposophy. And how do you view Steiner Rosicrucian work?
Well, I mean, in some ways we know a lot about it. In some ways we don't. He was associated with a pseudo-Masonic order that joined with Franz Hartmann's and Theodore Roos's Ordo Templi Orientis. And he was part of the Austrian and German magic tradition that actually did lead to the Golden Dawn, maybe not directly, but I mean, there was magical lodges, very popular and whatever. They were all over Europe. I forgot the word, pardon me. So I'm not the expert on his actual practices, but one thing he said that the best way to learn the mysteries he believed that Waldorf education was the best thing you could do to learn the mysteries. And he believed the next stage of Waldorf education, that Waldorf education would reach its height with the mysteries of the inner and the outer, the esoteric and the exoteric, would come to a unity when the students who went through that system And I was there grade 1 to grade 12, like K through 12 the whole time, even a little grade 13 actually. So that, like, I've never been into a public school while it was open with students in it, still to this day. I'm a private school kid, and he believed that once the graduates started teaching the school, that that would take the school to the next level, because then the people who are trained, like, the idea behind the Rosicrucian ethos is that it's not in your face, right? That's why one of the edicts is that you dress in the clothes of the land. You know, you don't try and show how cool you are by being all special and dressing uniquely or differently, or contrasting and fighting your environment. You follow the path of the chameleon, the hodos chameleonis, and blend in so that you can be a transmitter of the divine light to those around you, and like Osiris, be a blessing to the lives of those around you. And he believed the best way to infuse those mystical teachings is throughout the whole life of a human being, especially the educational life. And like, that's why, like, I realized after doing 12 years of eurythmy, you know, the fun dance form where you dance your name and all that, there's astrological symbols for like Aries and all the zodiacal planets and signs and planets. And after doing that every day in class for an hour for 12 years, I realized, once my psychic senses started kicking in grade 10, when I was 14, 15, and I could start to actually not just feel energy, but actually see it, I realized what eurythmy was. And all of a sudden I started taking it more seriously, because we would always just fuck around. We were just like, eurythmy, you know, it was a good chance for the guys to slap the girls and the girls to slap the guys and throw things at each other. And the teacher would get mad, and we'd try and see if we could make the teacher cry, of course. And she always did cry, you know, that sort of childhood things and shenanigans. But when I realized and started taking it seriously, it was because I realized what eurythmy was weightlifting for the aura.
Yes.
And that's when I was like, I still think today magicians should take eurythmy more seriously. And it influenced the way I move in the temple and the way I move in ritual. And I don't think there's a better thing that someone can do other than study eurythmy if they want to understand how to work within a ritual space.
This ritual and hard working, I believe that's the main phrase of this, because here we are so used to fast food magic, and you say, "Call, I become a god in 10 days," and something like that. And I don't know how it's in Canada, but here in Brazil, it's like a fever that people promising magical powers and everything like a fast food magic. So one of the questions that Breno prepared for you was about that. What do you think that's so important to talk about this hard work, and to convince other people that there are no shortcuts to magic? What do you think about that?
For the last few years, I've been trying to crack the code of self-initiation, right? Because some say all initiation is self-initiation, or you can say all initiation is from the higher self, really. But that doesn't change the fact that a lot of the systems of self-initiation, like Donald Michael Craig or even Chick Cicero's, and when I saw Chick and Tabby last year at the Pantheacon where I was lecturing, I asked them about this. We talked about this, as well as we talked about that crazy dude David Griffin. And the issue is, people have had a hard time self-initiating and finding success in that. So I've been making a study of that to find why, not for myself, but because given I've gotten the benefit of going through a full-time active temple, and I mean hardcore full-time, and then going through like as rigorously as you could, and then getting to be a Hierophant. And I was all the officers, almost all of them, except for Sentinel, I think, and got to do all those roles, some of them multiple times, for each time for a period of 6 months. And that's like 10-15 hour a week commitment, plus memorizing all your lines and doing everything else you do, plus, you know, go to school or have a job and have family and all that. I was like, maybe I can add something to this conversation, because it seems to be the conversation isn't finished. And so that's I'm trying to bring it back to what you said. I had a connection there, but that's, what was the question?
No, the main question was a lot of people that we interviewed practice martial arts, and they connected martial arts with magic.
Yeah,
I'm saying for what you said, that it's not martial arts, but it's training, and it's hard training. It's like a monastery training that you have to do everything every day to practice. And people think that they just get a PDF on the internet and they will practice home. It's like training Kung Fu with a book. And magic is practical. And you say that a lot in your podcast, that you have to breathe magic, as you said.
Yeah. You have to invoke often. You have to invoke magic and breath with every breath, and then you wake up to your spiritual bodies and your higher self, and then it flows all around you and becomes a nascent intrinsic part of your life. So within the issue of self-initiation that I was approaching, I had one of the breakthroughs I had, which will come out in a serious book that I'm going to put out. At the top of the two pillars, the white and black pillars of Jachin and Boaz in the temple, the pillars of force and form, which represent so much of the energy exchange and tension as you try and rise up the middle pillar of consciousness in what we call the Hall of Two Truths. At the top of those pillars are two red tetrahedrons with candles inside, or electric lights these days. And they represent the fires of test and trial. Because to pass through the pillars and the pillars of force and form in the Hall of Two Truths and enter into the one truth, which is the third point of the triangle, which is you have to, the key is those fires of test and trial, those tetrahedrons that sit at Hakma and Binah. And I realized that is one of the things that's got to be crucial within self-initiation, but in all initiation, you have to be tried, you have to be tested. And if you're doing this on your own, that means you have to make it hard for yourself. If you're in a group, they'll make it hard for you. Like, I was given a harder time than most because I was so young. They wanted to really, they many times I was pushed to see if I would break. And I grew up in that group, but it changed my life in radically amazing ways, and changed me fundamentally. I was not the same person I went in as I came out. Part of that is something I've wondered as I've written all my diaries every day over those 7 years. Is that partly because I was also growing up from age 15 to 24 doing that? And yeah, but I changed more than most. And I continued to change. And I actually just had my high school reunion, and we all got together and we had the best time, all 20 of us that graduated together. And at the end of the reunion, we all love each other. It was beautiful. It was one of the best weekends of my life, honestly. And everyone was talking as we, are now much older. We had a 16-year high school reunion, not a 10-year, because as we joke, we're Waldorf students, so we're not very good at mathematics. We do math with coloring pencils. Everyone said that everyone was the same. Everyone was talking about how no one had changed. Everyone was the same. And then someone said, except for RC, let's call me RC, for example. They said, except for him. And I looked up, I was like, what? And not everyone was there. We're all sitting in a massive circle drinking. The kids are running around. Everyone was like, oh yeah, what the hell happened? You're just totally different. Completely different. Like, I don't think I've stopped transforming myself because of this work. And I think that's transformation isn't just because of my Scorpio fucking ascendant. It's because this work challenges you. And as long as you are pushing yourself to the limit, then you're going to grow and you're going to change. I mean, you could say it's the same thing as just spending more time outside your comfort zone.
Yes. And that's something that martial arts pushed you a lot.
I interviewed on my podcast Ashen Chasan, or as I called him, Ashi Chassis. And I spent the first hour just talking about ninjutsu with him because I thought I wanted to. And he's an amazing master of that, as well as grimoire adept and all these things. Just a really fucking awesome guy. But I also wanted to piss people off because everyone loves Ash and Shasan, and then they're like listening to this podcast and like, what are they talking about? He's wasting his time, get him, ask him about spirits and the Goetia, and here we are talking about Shinkangata and Gogyo and Japanese esoteric martial arts, but it is all part of the same thing. We learn a lot from that. And I practice that martial art too, as well as like fencing, and martial arts and that kind of awareness has a lot to do with magic.
We interview some guy from Ninjutsu here in Brazil, and it is a lot. And he was worried that people here, he has a school, English, and then he moved to US, and now he trains SWAT teams, and he specializes in weapons and stuff.
Yeah.
But he said, I cannot teach ninjutsu anymore, the old ways. Because you slap a kid and then he had a bruise, and then there's police. So dude, he cannot push them.
We get punched hard in ninjutsu. Slowly, but hard. Like you have bruises. Yeah, people are getting soft, man.
And I believe that magic is the same thing. People are getting soft in magic.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many times, like during the fire grade, when my ego, you want the ego to get really bright and big. You want a certain time of alchemy for your ego to expand. You want that to happen. There's a lot of things you actually want to happen in alchemy that might not make sense to people, but they're good. It's part of a process. And so once you get the ego built up, then you want to purify it. This is part of you can break it into the alchemical processes of transformation. That might not be what alchemy was originally meant for, but who cares? It works for us. And so I was told by my supervising adept, who was training me as a new adept, before that, while I was getting ready for it, he said to me one day, he said, so sit down, and he said, so from now on, every Friday, right? And I was 20 years old, so this was a big deal. Every Friday, you are going to fast all day from sunrise, and then at sunset, you're going to go into the temple and do magical work all night. It doesn't matter what, do whatever you want, but you're going to stay in the temple till sunrise. So every Friday. And I was like, how long? He's like, I'll let you know. And it was many, many, many months. Like my fiance was not happy. My girlfriend was not happy. But I didn't see it as a slap in the face. I saw it as an opportunity. Like, here's a challenge. Like, I didn't know of anyone else being asked to do that, though I'm sure a few had been. But that, so you combine the hot and the cold, right? You combine the red and the white, and then you through putrefaction, you purify them into gold. And so you get someone's ego like expanded, and then you challenge it. And some people break. Some people say, you know what, I'm done with this shit. I'm going to start my own group and tell everyone that I'm the best ever. And you don't know what you're fucking doing, because you can't tell me what to do. And lots of people fall that way. Most of I'm of Temple Tahuti, the only three of the adepti still practice, and one of them practices in a very dark way, my protege. And so Nineveh Shadrach still practices, and I still practice and teach, and the others don't want to talk about it. Don't even want to talk about it. They don't like the fact that I'm still even practicing it. So what happened to them? These amazing human beings that I looked up to, what happened to them? They're angry that I'm even still doing the thing that they taught me.
Yeah.
Crazy.
They get up. It's crazy. But I believe it happens everywhere. I have a question from Bruno, and he says, could you tell us about your approach to Celtic magic, Druidism, and Celtic Wicca?
Well, I actually love fairy Wicca. I love fairy Wicca because it seems like this fluffy, silly thing. But ever since I got into it, I was taking fairies from my Irish Catholic Celtic heritage very seriously. And fairies were my first love in magic. And, I was 12, 13 years old, pouring milk onto the plants in the back garden so that the gnomes and stuff would come and hang out with me and talk to me. And I was reading Elifa Levy's prayers to the elemental spirits. And I was aware at an early age, because in Waldorf school they read you all of the Grimm's fairy tales in when you're 6 years old. Every day they read you an hour of Grimm's fairy tales because that's what you do in Waldorf school. And I was aware that fairies were not these happy, flaky, fluffy things, that they were intense matrices of energy that were powerful and sometimes chaotic and belonged to a different order of reason and logic than we did. And so to this day, I've maintained a love of them, and I'm about to release a lot of serious work that I've done this month, leading up to the birthday of W.B. Yeats next month on June 13th. So there'll be some very exciting, an exciting celebration day for Yeats's birthday. People can go to orderofcelticmysteries.com to find out about that. And working with those fairy spirits, which are really the Irish gods who went under the Sidhe, right? The Tuatha Danann, the gods of Ireland who came from boats in the mists from the Atlantic Ocean. They were cast out by the sons of Mill, or the Milesians, and they went under the hills, or under the Sidhe, because Sidhe means hill as well in Irish. And then they became the fairies and had this whole other role. So they exist in Tirnanog, which is the island of the young, but they also exist under the hills, under the Sidhe, which is why the Irish have to, not cut down hawthorn trees. When I spent 5 years in Ireland living there and practicing there, you see a field or a mountain, it's clear cut, but then you'll see one tree here, and then a mile away, another tree. And you're like, what's up with those trees? They're hawthorn trees. And why don't you cut them down? And then someone will right away say, oh, sure enough, I'll tell you, John O'Flaherty, he cut down a tree, didn't he? Didn't he cut it down? And the next day he died. And then his family died. And then his son died and killed someone else, all because of the tree. They're like, well, maybe he was just mad. Yeah, the fairies made him mad. And I love that. So, and some of the other people, I heard just Damien Eccles speaking about fairies the other day on Patreon, and I loved, he says a lot of stuff, and I like him. I mean, I think we all owe him $5 each a month. If like the whole planet should give that man $5 each a month, because he's been through a lot of shit just because he looked, like a goth in the 90s, like I did. But while he was going to jail on death row, I was getting initiated in the Golden Dawn in the 90s. So, but that shit could happen to any of us, right? He mentioned how dangerous fairies are and how powerful and chaotic, which is why I'm very excited to release some very new work that Yeats started and that I've continued to do with like the King of the Fairies this month, and the other fairy spirits. But I don't know much about Reconstructionist Druidry. I'm a fan of John Michael Greer and a lot of those traditions. I love the old movie Excalibur and the Anal Natrachut Vaspitud Dachiel Diende. I love those ideas. It doesn't matter to me if they're authentic or not. There's a lot of chaos magic in me, and I don't care if something comes from a movie or if someone made it up in a manuscript, like the Book of Ferrelt from the 21 Lessons of Merlin. Oh, that's not valid, people say. That's not real Druidry because it was made up. Enochian magic is made up. How do you like them apples? Oh, no, that was inspired by spirits and angels. What? And so Douglas Monroe couldn't have been inspired by spirits and angels just because he said he found this old manuscript and he was lying? Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, Phil Hine is right about a lot when he talks about chaos magic. I like him. Let me say some more. So Yeats envisioned originally the Golden Dawn was meant to be done with Irish god forms instead of Egyptian, but it was too complicated. They had no physical images of what those gods would look like. The Egyptian gods were already drawn. We knew what they looked like. We could imagine their colors or create a color scheme based on Kabbalistic correspondences. And that's what Mathers and Yeats decided to do. But Mathers called himself MacGregor, Comte de Glenstray, because he loved the Celtic stuff. And Yeats loved the Celtic stuff. So they wanted to actually use Celtic god forms. And when they put that on the sideline, him and Mathers and Moyna decided to continue the Celtic mysteries as a different kind of magical order. But the intention was definitely to make it a druidical magical order based on the Celtic stories. Mainly, he was meant to do just the Irish stories, just the Irish gods. But then his friend William Sharp, who wrote as Fiona, what's her name, Fiona Shaw, convinced him to include the Scottish Gaelic gods as well, because Irish Gaelic and Scottish Gaelic are very related. The stories and gods are very related, and Scottish Gaelic or Scotch or Gaelic comes directly out of the Irish language. It's not a dialect. It's a direct language from that. And then, of course, Manx is the Irish the other Celtic language or Gaelic language from the Isle of Man, where John Rhys Davies is from, who played Gimli in Lord of the Rings. He's from this little island in between Scotland and Ireland, and they have their own language there, their own Gaelic language. There's 3 Gaelic languages: Irish, Scottish, and Manx. And then there's 3 Brythonic languages: Welsh, Cornish, and Breton. And these Brythonic languages and these 3 Gaelic languages together form the 6 Celtic languages of the Celtic language group. And Irish is the oldest of them and is also the 3rd oldest language in the Western world, because it came out of Old Irish that was then Latinized by the monks.
Would you believe that Golden Dawn would be as big as it got if they choose that path? I really don't think so. I believe Egypt was much more tasteful.
Yeah, well, especially since E.A. Wallace Budge and the excavations in Egypt that were happening at that time, all of that stuff was very booming. Like, people were excavating and making discoveries in Egypt, and a lot of the scholarship turned out to be wrong, but they were starting. It was a serious undertaking to unearth the mysteries of Egypt and the ancient Near East. Whereas at that time in Ireland, when the Golden Dawn started in 1888, my great grandfather, he was beaten in school if he spoke Irish. If he was caught speaking Irish, they would beat the shit out of him. And my family left Dublin a year before the Easter Rising in 1916 and moved to Vancouver. So, you would be, if you play the Irish bagpipes when the Golden Dawn was started in Ireland, you played the Irish bagpipes, and I play those, they would hang you from a tree. So there was no investigation into Celtic heritage happening during the time of the Golden Dawn in Ireland. Yeats's life work, in large part, one of the reasons he wanted to create the order was to cause Irish revolution and free Ireland from English rule. And you could say that his work did succeed, because he wanted to make Irish culture one of the foremost cultures in the world. Irish mythology, he wanted to speak to the entire world and save Ireland from English rule. And look what happened. Ireland did break free. He did create a Celtic Renaissance, the Celtic twilight of literature and thoughts and poetry. And then Ireland did break free, mostly, except for 6 counties. And he became one of the first senators of Ireland. And what a legacy for a magician of the Golden Dawn like Yeats, to show the effectiveness of how this work amplified the best qualities of his soul, so that he could really perform his true will on earth and change the world. And that's what led up to the 1990s Celtic Tiger economic boom. Enya, like, everyone loves Celtic and Irish shit now, right? It's very, very popular. And you could say that's because Yeats had a great work, and he finished it. So there's a little bit left to do.
In Brazil, we really like the Celtic fairies, because here we have the Brazilian fairies are really bloody, and they are dreadful, and they're evil spirits in the forest. Because here we have the Amazon forest, but we have also other forests that are really heavy. And if you go to one of these forests, you cannot see about 100 meters inside. So everything is scary.
Wow.
You feel that when you are in a jungle, that you do not belong there, and the presence there and the spirits there. So most of the witches here and witchcraft, and my wife studies a lot of that with the girls, and they said they invoke spirits and they are afraid of them. It's like it's not like what we see in books, the nice, gloomy, fairy, beautiful. In Brazil, no, we are spirits, and they have a lot of pain. because we have a lot of slaves that they run to the forest and they die, and their spirits seek out revenge and stuff like that. And it's, in a way, it's very similar. So I really enjoyed this book. We'll have to tell you when it's on. We will talk again, and then we can say something more about that.
Well, I'm not really focused on a book right now. I'm focused on creating the initiations. Yeats started writing the initiations for 5 grades for the Order of Celtic Mysteries. And so I'm almost finished the first one. And as soon as the world opens up, we'll have an international event. And anyone who wants to come and go through that first initiation can go through it. And we'll do 2 versions of that initiation. Only one is necessary. Only one is necessary, but the second one is optional. And the second one done on the same weekend will be with entheogens, because Yeats was a big lover of peyote, but also hashish. He said he liked peyote, but he preferred hashish. And him, a lot of people don't realize that him and his love, Maud Gonne, people think they had a spiritual marriage and a celibate relationship, but no, they would get together in hotels, do a bunch of peyote, and fuck their brains out. Pardon my French. So integrating entheogens into the 5 layers of the initiations as an optional second initiation. So you could do the initiation twice, once sober, which I think is sober magic is the best, but entheogenic magic is a good idea. And so developing these initiations fully from him is something I felt somewhat qualified to do, because he wasn't trying to create a druid system. He wanted it to be a fusion of the mythology of Ireland with the techniques of the Golden Dawn. So that's what he wanted it to be. And Mathers actually wrote the first initiation, and Yeats then wrote a different version of the initiation. So I've combined the 2 together for the first initiation, and we'll do each initiation over the 5 years, 1 a year, and anyone can go through them. And then anyone can take, I'm not creating an order here for me to run. I'm creating a system, or finishing a system that was already started, and it's for everyone. And whoever wants to then take it and run with it after that is great. The more we can all work together, the more groups that can study that material, the better. So I will put out a grimoire of the Celtic Mysteries of Yeats's work, but fine-tuned and finished in a way that he didn't have time to do, because he was too busy changing the world like he should. And that's the real goal, is to just have another approach to hermetic ceremonial magic, but with this Celtic flavor, and with Yeats's poetry that is just so beautiful. The language, reading his outlines for these things, I couldn't do this 20 years ago when I wrote my first book on W.B. Yeats, which is called The Celtic Mysteries of W.B. Yeats, Irish Gods, Myths, and the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. And that book has gotten a lot of criticism. There's a lot of reviewers that say this is shit, don't read it, and it's boring. But it's because I wrote it academically. I wrote it academically while I was finishing Waldorf School, high school. And then when I went to university, I took it to the dean of the university and said, I wrote this book. And they skipped me my bachelor's degree and put me straight into my master's when they read it. So it's not popular to the mainstream of readers, but academically it's excellent. The scholarship is excellent. And it was a very precise project, that book. All I wanted to do was finish a structuralist rationale for corresponding Irish gods to the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Because Yeats started to, Mathers helped, but they didn't finish it because they didn't have the books, and the scholarship in Irish gods and mythology didn't exist. I mean, the language was illegal. The music was you were killed for playing Celtic music in his lifetime, like just hung from a tree like a dog. And he didn't have access to the resources. He created the Celtic revival with his friends that allowed there to be Irish studies departments around the world now, even at Harvard. And now people know Old Irish. There's scholars of Old Irish. And so I finished his logical structuralist methodology of what God makes the most sense for this spherot. and for the Sephira of the tree of life, right? And gods don't correspond perfectly to the tree of life. It's not meant to be that way. But I explain that in the book. I talk about structuralist methodology. I talk about theogonies and theocracies. Theogonies are the generation of God, and it's how it was made. Theocracies is there's two spellings for theocracy. One is with a C, one's with an S, and the C means a country ruled by a religion, but the other one with an S means the collection of attributes that makes up a god, and that's called the god's theocracy with an S. And so I did a careful analysis of that. I read and put together all the material that I could, and that was the beginning of that work for me. And now I'm at the end stage of that. So once the world opens up, we'll do the 5 initiations. People can do them, and I'll probably even write a self-initiation version of them, though it's really best, of course, to do the full ones. But why not create both options? I just want to see the material presented in the best light by someone who knows the Golden Dawn tradition inside out and also knows the Celtic music, because I play Celtic music. I play like many instruments and toured in a band for many years, singing and playing Irish music. I've got music all over iTunes and Spotify. And the Golden Dawn material, to integrate that all together is what is needed for the Order of Celtic Mysteries to be a real thing that could exist. And the goal is just I'll do it completely and as best I can, and then people can build on it from there as they want. My plan is to present the 5 initiations over 5 years, and then I'm done. Someone else who's gone through them, of all the people that go through all of them, one of them will take over, and I'll go through all the initiations over the next 5 years, because I want to go through them too. William Wynne Westcott did that in the Golden Dawn. But one of the strange things is even today, there's Golden Dawn orders run by magicians who have never gone through the initiations they're performing. And I don't want to be like that.
Or any initiation at all. I asked you about the book because here in Brazil, will probably be banished from the world in the next few years. So for us, it would be the best if we can get our hands in our book.
Well, I generally with South America try to price my books because I can control the price differently. So I try to put it as low as I can. A lot of my books, like the ones in the Mexico market, I made them so I don't make any money, just because I'm aware that people like have less money. And so I'll check my Brazil prices, and if I can make them as low as possible, because I don't understand your economy very well, but I don't think you make the same as us, right? Financially.
No, yeah. It's really, really low. But here we have it's a huge group and it's organized, and we do most of our things from crowdfunding. So we can get a very nice translator and with high quality, and get to work and transform it into a real book and a beautiful book. And that's what we are doing for the past year, because since we can't gather together and we are interviewing foreign authors what would I say? We're approaching the smart ones and get the gold stuff. And people here recognize that and they say, whoa, you're doing a great job. So we want that. And well, I believe when they watch this and they talk about Celtic, we really love Celtic mythology. Awesome. Here. So I believe that your book will be one of the top voted to translate here. So I believe we can make something.
Let's do it. You can translate the initiations too and do all of that if you want. Like I have books in Spanish. An adept who was trained by a student of mine 10 years after I was gone reached out 10 years later and asked for my books, and I sent them to her for free, and then she sent them back all translated into Spanish. And I was like, I just sent you my books for free as a gift. And she's like, yeah, and I'm sending you back all your books translated into Spanish as a gift. And I was like,
well, we do have awesome. A translation team here, and since it would be a pleasure to do that. I have a question from Luis. He said, I have been in Chaos Magic path the last 24 years. Luis interviewed him. He is one of the elders here. He's a in this past a lot of time. He asked one common search that's for the most people that goes through chaos magic path is the growth of personal power, in the belief that magic would help them to acquire objects of desire. Based on your experience, how magic could help to improve someone in the growing of personal power?
Well, I'm a big believer. Personally, I love gods and fairies. I'm not sure there's a difference between gods and fairies and aliens and angels, honestly, especially after doing lots and lots of DMT the last couple of years. But ultimately, I find my personal deepest faith is Christian, and very much based on the mythology of Jesus as a version of the Horus story, because Jesus is Horus. Even when I was in seminary and I read a book called The Pagan Christ by an Anglican priest, and I said to my teachers, I'm like, this book says that Jesus just was a version of the Egyptian Horus and Isis, and it's all just taken from that. And I was curious what my professors in the Catholic and Christian seminary would say, and they were like, yeah, we know. They're like, of course. I was like, what? Why didn't you tell us that? They're like, well, everyone knows this. That's not a big deal, but who cares? And I was like, wow. So yeah, that's history, that's the development of story. So as a result, this is a long answer to a short question, I apologize. I believe that the greatest personal power comes from relinquishing all of your personal power. When you die to the world, you are reborn to the spiritual world. And if you can do that while you're still alive in the flesh, that's when all of the world of the spirit comes into you, and your power is not your power anymore. It's the power of nature and spirit, and it's the power of everything, because we are the reflection of God, and the reflection is God. There's no emanationism. We're all part of the same thing at every point. Aleph in manifestation, like David Heimsmith says, the one Aleph here outside that's God, and the other Aleph that's inside are the same, because they're both Aleph, they're both one, and they're all the same. So at every stage of reality, every being is still the core nexus of the eternal, of the one, of everything. It's all one, and that's why we say Ararita, Ahadrosh, Ahadoto, and that's my belief in personal power. That's my theology. Other people have different approaches, and I think that's okay. There's lots of ways up the mountain. Does that answer the question?
I believe so. He will say that in the chat, and I will say. You mentioned DMT. Here in Brazil, we have the Jurema, and it's a kind of ayahuasca. We call the jungle wine. That's legal. That's mostly the what we have main access or official access. How can you tell us about a little bit about your DMT and entheogen experience?
Yeah. So last year I did 22 experiments entheogenically with DMT, and it was only on the very last one that I had a breakthrough. And all of my experiments were designed like I would do invocation, I would do rituals, I would go in with what chaos magicians would call certain paradigms. And most of the time when I went in with a paradigm into the DMT realm, it was just like slapped out of my being. It was like they were like, don't do that here. Don't even think that here. Don't bring that conception here. That has no place here. That might work where you are, but that doesn't work where we are. So my goal with all those experiments was to see if my magic and ritual could in any way allow me to control where I went within those realms. And this was me being very new to DMT and Changa. I did mostly just pure DMT, but on the last one, I tried it, maybe what was the most obvious thing to try, but it worked. And I was able to push out of some dark realms I was in, because, there's a lot of, they seem dark, but they might not be dark. Who knows? I'm still at the beginning of my entheogenic journey in a way. but I did break through, and I pushed out, and I went to higher and higher realms, and using a set of symbols and things that I did that I'm not going to share, because it worked for me, because it was part of my symbol set, you know, and accessing initiations and ceremonies and levels of consciousness that I'm familiar with, and everyone has their own. But I broke through to have what was actually a surprising vision. And there's no other way to describe it except it was the vision of Ezekiel staring into the face of Metatron. And I felt stripped away, and I was fully out of body, right? Like I had no awareness of being on my bed at all. Like I was not there. I was out of body and staring into the face of Metatron. And there was even the wings and the eyes and the cherubim. It questioned me. And I felt in that moment that if I gave the wrong answer, or a false answer, or a dirty answer, that I felt like I would be eradicated. My spirit would just become nothing, and I might even not wake up. That's how I felt. So I had to actually really, on every level, become what they would call naked before the Lord. And I had to all I could think to do was to speak my true name. And I did. And it bowed, the base of Metatron bowed, and then it asked me what I wanted. And I wanted an answer to a question, and it gave me the answer. And then I touched base with a friend just a few minutes later while I was still coming out of that state, and told her what I had gone through and everything. And she was much more experienced with these things than I was. And she seemed like it resonated with her too. So that was very powerful. And yeah, so you can have those experiences on those things. And it's the solve et coagula, the alchemical process of dissolving and recoagulating, that we can do very powerfully with entheogens. But you can also just do it sober with magic, so you can do it both ways. But it's fun to do entheogens. Last October at Chris Bennett's place, when I was in quarantine up in the mountains 5 hours from here in northern British Columbia, sort of northern, BC's very big. I did a first experiment with the King of the Fairies, Midir or Mir, that Yeats read out. So I used Yeats's actual evocation script, and I ate 5 grams of mushrooms, and I sat there doing the evocation for about 4 or 5 hours until the King of the Fairies showed up. And it was electric. It was powerful. And he was not really happy to see me. He didn't really even want to come very close. And I saw him physically because of the 5 grams of mushrooms. I saw him physically with my eyes. I didn't need to scry or use astral vision. It was just like reality was there. And for hours, then I traced a sigil that he gave me so I could contact him more easily. And I have some artwork coming out now done by a graphic designer friend who I play games with on my Friday night Dungeons and Dragons and board game night. And she did a beautiful job, and I'll release that in the next few days. Her name's whatever. I don't have permission to say it, but I'm sure she'd love there'll be links. And that working with the King of the Fairies sort of is I think it's good to do fairy work with mushrooms, because in Ireland they actually call mushrooms kapani puka. The word for magic mushrooms in Ireland is kapani puka, which means the cap of the fairies, or the cap of the puka. And the puka, of course, is a shape-shifting fairy. So the idea is that when you enter into the realm of the fairies by eating the puka hat, right? That's what you do in Ireland. And they grow in the northern hills of Donegal in the fall, and everyone picks them. I've read academics who said mushrooms weren't in Ireland or the United Kingdom until the 60s. I've read scholars with PhDs who have said that. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, the country people have been drinking tea all winter long through the shitty rainy winters of Donegal, drinking psilocybin mushroom tea forever. They even have an old name that relates it to a shape-shifting fairy, because the idea is when you eat the mushrooms, you go into the Chirnanog, and the theory is, if you don't shapeshift with the journey, with the trip, right? If you can't change your shape with the journey, then you can have a bad trip and get lost in fairyland, or the fairies might fuck with you. And if you've done a lot of mushrooms, you got to go with the flow. If you fight that flow, oh baby.
This is fantastic, because it was we interviewed some Indians and some people from the forest, and they related the exactly same experience within the jungles of Amazon. So I believe the spirits are everywhere, really,
Yeah.
and the Kabbalah and the structure is the same. And we just give fancy names depending on the culture. So this work that you are doing that compared the creatures, the gods, the fairies to the tree, I believe we will really love that.
Good.
I have.
Well, I'm having fun with it, and I'm going to present the information in a way that hopefully will let other people have fun with it and expand their spirituality. It should be a radical system, like radical transformation, radical experience. And I think we need that in this world now. We need radical change. And whether we like it or not, radical change is fucking happening.
Yes. That was another question that we had to prepare for you. That you started your podcast in 2020. Besides the podcast, what pandemic affected positively or negatively your work?
Well, I had podcasts before that, but they kept getting canceled. This time it hasn't gotten canceled, and that's good. And it's gotten very big and very popular, and that's cool. I was surprised. I don't know why, because I talk about a lot of crazy stuff on it, but I'm glad it hasn't gotten canceled. How did the pandemic affect it? I mean, I wouldn't have done it every day. Like in 1 year now, the podcast is 14 months old, and it's got, I think 200 episodes and over 1,000 hours of content. So it's a lot of stuff. The main idea was to present as an academic and a failed PhD student. I wanted to present academic research on esotericism, but interpret it to practitioners, especially to people that might not have academic backgrounds, because the information is good, but a lot of the time it's kept away, and it's presented in ways that aren't valuable to practitioners. So I would give commentaries on academic research, and then I started talking to friends in interviews, and more people wanted to talk to me, and now I have too many people to talk to, though I always want to talk to more people, and I like doing them spontaneously too. I don't like planning them too much. I like to just sort of do them. But we have to plan a little bit because we're all adults, right?
When we're interviewing Brazilian authors, it's less formal, but since we are interviewing foreign author, we get really nervous here. That's why we sent you the question first. But I believe this conversation has been great.
Oh yeah. Yeah. What other questions we have?
I have another one. That you're as a musician, what do you think the music adds to your process in the path, and how the magic added to your music?
Over the years that I was playing professionally, like six nights a week, 3 hours, 4 hours a night, six nights a week, like a lot, so that's over 200 shows a year for 12 years, 5 years on tour, and then 8 years in Vancouver. And I haven't hardly played at all since pandemic, like not even practice. If you play music, even this apartment building, the Chinese owners will throw you out. Yeah, they want to get rid of all the white people from Canada, of course. The music became magic to me, and learning music, I think, having parts of my life destroyed, going into that black dragon phase of putrefaction, opened me up to the creativity of music. And I didn't really know music before that, and learning music taught me so much. It teaches you about groove and rhythm and sonic vibrations in a whole other way. And having done the vibratory magic of the Golden Dawn, because the Golden Dawn really pioneered vibration, right? They always say vibrate, and a lot of people don't like that. But in what world does sound not have a lot to do with magic? Like, sound is, everyone loves their sound bowls and their sound things. So why would you want to just say Yahweh, or why would you just want to be Yod Hey Vav Hey? No, It's not yod hey vav hey. It's yum. You feel it. Your whole body, body changes, and eventually it's the point that you only have to do an exercise of thinking it, and you feel the same physical sensation. Like when I do Enochian work, I did Enochian work one time in person with Lon Milo Duquette, and you know, you're out of your body. My whole body went numb and I was gone. I didn't even try to leave my body and I was gone. And, you know, I did a ritual for some money. The first time I ever did money magic was in that ether working with text, with the ether of text within lawn. And the next morning I woke up and there was $1,300 in my bank account from someone I hadn't seen in 5 years. So music is magic to me. And when adepts came out from different orders to see me perform over the years I played magic, because once in a while, magicians would be like, let's go see what the fuck Frater RC is doing at his music shows. Let's go to one. Or sometimes they had problems, or like old people that I knew had joined their orders and caused problems. They'd come out to see me and I'd say, yeah, well, you know, I'm not doing that much magic anymore. And they'd say to me, we just watched you do 3 hours of magic. Like, were you not in a god form? Were you not invoking? Were you not casting spells with your voice and your hands and your foot stomping on the ground? I'm like, well, of course I was. And they're like, yeah, you're still doing it, just experiencing a very musical Celtic primal form of magic. And of course I was. And there's a reason I became very popular in doing that sort of music, and took a lot of gigs from a lot of other people because I was more compelling to watch, you know, a wonder, they said. And to me, that fusion of that kind of experience with the magic is just became a natural thing. And I think it works very well together. That so many musicians are magicians and magicians are musicians. It makes sense.
It makes total sense. Total sense. And we're almost get to the end. There's a question from Renan. It is, how's the Canadian occultist scenario?
Not so good. No, there's a reason I was in California. There was a reason I was in Prague and Berlin and France and London the other year before COVID. There's just not many people in Canada. Like, you know, what Canada needs is like 10 more cities with over 1 million people. And like, we need like another 100 million people to immigrate here, like right away. We need that. We really, really do. There's no one in this country. Like, please. I know it's cold, but we have heating, you know. We need more cities. Please move to Canada and help us populate this massive space. Like, we have farmland in the middle of Canada that could grow enough food to feed the entire world, and we don't grow anything on it because the US government pays us not to grow anything on it so they can control food prices. So we need people to move here, start cities, farmland, and make this country one that has a subculture, because there's no subculture when you only have 30 million people in a country much larger than the United States.
Oh, or shaman things. You have a lot of forest.
Yeah, I did a lot of sweat lodges with First Nation shamans growing up as a kid, and there's so much space. I mean, you can drive 10 hours into the wilderness and see nothing. You can just go hike, you know, if I just go over there across the water where I grew up, and like I'm from North Vancouver, which is where Frater Achad, Crowley's protege, lived and died. And I spent a lot of my childhood at his gravestone, not knowing it was his, doing rituals, which is funny. And you know, Chris Bennett, my friend, is probably the reincarnation of Achad. They grew up on the same street they lived on the same street and stuff in North Vancouver. But yeah, if you walk into the wilderness, you could walk for 10 days and you won't see anyone. Like, this place is huge. We need more people. So unfortunately, I probably won't spend my life in Canada just because there's not many people around. Like, since I've been back in Vancouver, everywhere I go, there's lots of people to work with and do magic with and things to do. I've been back in Vancouver since I arrived on September 21st on the equinox. I've done one ritual with one other person, and no one else can do anything. Either it's because of COVID, or it's just because this is Canada and people are very sort of a lot of people don't want, they're lazy. There's a lot of laziness. We do have a lot of magical groups here. They're just not very active. They're not that hardcore. If you join them, you can do some things, but yeah, no, I'd say the Canadian occult scene is like very weak compared to Europe and to America. I don't know how it is in Brazil, but I love that I'm talking to you guys and that there's a bunch of stuff going on.
In Brazil, we have it's probably a mix of everything, but it's really small because here's a Catholic country, a most evangelical neo-Pentecostal country with a lot of churches and priests and a lot of satanic panic. So if you are Buddhist, you are Satan worship, no matter what. So since we are all Satanists, then we are all together. So we have Buddhists and Satanists and Umbanda, Kimbanda, Candomblé, and everything you can think of, we're all together and mixed. That's Brazilian occult scenario. Well, we are almost getting the end, and we have a question that we ask to every guest. And there's no wrong answer or right answer. I believe I asked this question to 150 mages, and I got 150 different answers. So based on everything you experienced and studied and practiced, what do you believe happens to us after we die?
I think it depends on how we live our lives. I think that maybe part of your being can come back and do this again. Maybe you just develop as far as you can, and then I think there's options. I think you have choices. Rudolf Steiner believed that the only thing you take with you after you die is the most profound and highest spiritual experiences, especially the spiritual experiences of true love, of real love. And I've noticed, especially in the DMT realms, it really does seem like there's a lot of realities you could go to. And I've seen a lot of realities I don't want to go to. So I think integrity matters. I think virtue matters. At the same time, I'm not a fan of this culture of virtue signaling and cancel culture that sort of has forgotten the idea of we're all sinners, and also let he who is without sin cast the first stone. This idea that we should cancel everybody would lead to no one talking ever again. You need forgiveness. We're entering into a dangerous time where we don't believe in the power of forgiveness anymore. We believe that you should condemn people for one mistake, and they should be on the street, and they should be terminated, not allowed to eat, not allowed to sleep, just dead because they make one mistake. This is very popular these days, and it's very dangerous because it's ignoring the fundamental tenets of human life, which is we all make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes, sometimes maybe big mistakes, and there needs to be forgiveness and a path to redemption. But the key, of course, as Roman Catholics know, to forgiveness is atonement. So you might have to do something for that forgiveness to happen. We might have to, maybe do a Ave Maria or Hail Mary, Pater Noster, Quies and Celis, or something. There has to be a process, and it's probably alchemical, but how we deal with our lives, how the state of our soul with our body of light, I think that has a lot to do with our options after we die. And there was years in my life where I did believe it was just lights out, game over, done. There was years where I did believe that. Then I did DMT. And I realized maybe it's possible. What if it's possible that we actually are these infinitely powerful beings of light? What if we actually do die or can die and be reborn as these cosmic flying divine beings going in through multidimensional outer space, inner space, quantum realities. Like, what if we are these Ishim, these elevated souls that are these all-powerful beings, and then when we die we realize it again, we're like, holy shit, how the fuck did I forget that? Maybe that's true, maybe that's real, maybe that is the case. And either way, it's probably a better way to live your life, thinking I should be as noble as I can, as good as I can, and as understanding and forgiving as I can. And at the end of the day, love God, love nature and spirit, and treat everyone else around me like I would treat myself. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. Maybe there's going to be some prophet who tells us that.
Our last question would be, what advice would you give to someone that is starting today? But you already gave me the greatest advice in this last answer. You must be forgiveness. Forgive all people and understand that we are all sinners. That's a great advice. But for the record, what advice would you give to someone that's starting today in Magick? And he listened to our podcast, and he said, wow, the Celtic and the fairies and everything. I want that. And there's a question, and the last one is, how can we find you? So there's two questions.
If you're starting Magick today, and it's never too late to start, you don't need to be young like me. Honestly, it's probably better to start when you're like 40, like I just turned 40 in January and on the 31st. And it's probably better if you start when you're 40. That's easy because, you know, you have a lot of stuff to cover in a short period of time, and that's really exciting. If you start when you're 7 years old getting your first initiation, that's a long life to do magic, and you might, you'll run into more problems. It's probably good to just, whether you start young or old, here's the thing to remember: it's your magic, it's no one else's. That's the thing I'd say. People give away their power too much. I've done it sometimes, for sure. We'll all do it. If you do it long enough, someday you'll probably accidentally give away some of your power. Maybe not to a teacher, maybe it's to a lover, to your family, to a friend, to a boss, to a society, to a cult, to a movement, to an ideology, or to a spirit that, tricked you, or a fairy that pulled your pants down and spanked you on the butt. Who knows? But it's your magic, and don't ever let anyone take your magic away from you. At the same time, try and not be a dick and learn from everyone around you, and we'll have a lot of fun, because we should have fun. Like the DMT spirits, they're having fun, and I think they're crazy. They probably think we're crazy when they see us not having fun. We should be dancing and singing and playing and building our reality, just like they're building the reality of subtle worlds and subtle levels beyond ours or within ours. Who knows? It's your magic, no one else's.
That is great. And how can we find you?
You can find me at magicwithoutfears.com for my podcast. That's Magic with a K, magicwithoutfears.com. You can also find me, if you're interested in the Celtic stuff, there's still an open free subscription to that, orderofcelticmysteries.com. And if you want to be part of my weekly classes, you can go to hermeticmysteryschool.com, where I do weekly classes, and I have tons of lessons which you can even download one at a time and put it together in your own curriculum. And I'm doing new ones every week. Right now we're exploring the Bonorum and the Heptarchia Mystica of the Enochian system with my students. And we're having a lot of fun doing experiments with that. But we do a lot of things. We don't just do Golden Dawn style stuff. We do whatever. I like all magic, and so I talk about everything, except geomancy. I don't like geomancy. Stephen Skinner can do that. He's got it covered. There's some, like, I always like, in the occult world, I think it's important to recognize when other people do things well, and rather than try and do your own version of it, just bring it together. Let's build bridges. I'm very big on building bridges, and building connections and commonality and dialogue. So you can go to hermeticmysteryschool.com. You can join the Cyber Guild for free, and I do a free monthly class there every Sunday, every month, a free class. And if you miss it, you can download it after for a couple bucks. And if you want to join the weekly classes, that is $49 a month US, and that is a lot. But if you're from a different country with a different pay economy, and you want to pay, you can't afford that, just tell me what you can afford and we'll make it work. We'll figure it out. I'm fine with that. When people can't afford it, I've let them in for free sometimes, because I'm doing the classes anyway. I want people to benefit from it, because I'm not going to do it forever. I'm going to do it for a certain period of time. And once I feel I've told everything that I have to tell, and it's all recorded and on the teaching site, on the school site, then I'm not going to spin my wheels and make up new shit. I'm just going to, over the next few years, tell everyone everything I have to say. And then I'm going to get on with my life and maybe go back on tour, or find a wife and kids, or maybe I'll move to Brazil and drink ayahuasca with you and play all those board games, dude.
Has been almost a year that I cannot play anything because we are just locked here.
You're locked down too, eh?
But you are most welcome here in Brazil. Anytime you want to come here, you have where to be, and have people in almost every city here, so you'll be well guided, and we'll take you to a tour on the Candomblé and Umbanda and Kimbanda and religion. You see, meet spirits, talk to spirits. Very nice.
That sounds good. We'll definitely do a trip. Yeah. South America is on the list, so I'd love to come to Brazil and all of that. So thanks. Yeah, and thank you for having me, and thanks everyone who's listening. La Munière, Louis, Breno, Renan, and Bruno. Very nice to almost see your faces. I wish I could actually see your faces, but that's okay. I'm sure you're Brazilian, so you're all prettier than me.
They will open the cams. It's just for recording here, because we cannot do this live, because we have to put subtitles. We tried, not me, other people tried to interview Thomas Carlson and other authors, but we didn't get much, because in Brazil it's very difficult to find people who actually understand English and speak English. So we have to record this, and then we put subtitles, and then we release it. But there will be a lot of people. People here love Fairy and Celtic and DMT and stuff and everything you said. So I believe there will be a lot of views here. And everything you said, there will be in the description of the video. Then I'll talk to you and get everything written. But for you who are listening to us and watching us, all that he said is right here in the description of the video. So we are getting to the end. Thank you so much, Frater. It has been a real pleasure. We really loved you. It has been an honor to talk to you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm honored to be on it, and it's been great. This is a great conversation. You have to come on my podcast, or any other magicians that want to come on my podcast and talk about anything. It's very casual, though we tend to talk a long time, often 3 to 5 hours.
That is great.
Because I'm insane. Because I'm crazy.
I'll explain to you how the dynamics of Brazil. And we have a saying here that says, Brazil is not for amateurs. And things are like a motto for the country. Brazil is not for amateurs. It's the country's motto.
Jesus, man. And I have books on Amazon. I'll go see what the Brazilian prices are, and I'll make them as low as I can. These are not like books written to be good books. I shouldn't say that, but what they are is they're just collections of the writings that I made when I was 16 to 23, going through the Golden Dawn, right? So anything I wrote down that seemed new or different or a good interpretation, I put it out on Amazon when I was years ago, when I was told that I was dying and sick. Turned out I just had celiac disease and didn't know it. So fuck the doctors. They don't know what they're talking about. Canadian healthcare is a joke. And so those things are out, but I am working on a self-initiation breakthrough that I've figured out that might help a lot of people, or at least be interesting, and a grimoire of the Celtic mysteries and a manual devotion for the Order of Celtic Mysteries, and all the grade material for the Order of Celtic Mysteries. When you go through the initiation, that'll all be hardcover, leather bound, done by a bookbinder I know from Scotland here, and that'll be done very nice, and especially just for that order. And that material will expand as people go through the material and learn and add to it. It'll be a growing order. I'm not trying to create anything fixed.
Oh, that's great. I'm sorry it was so formal, but since we have the script and we have to ask you, and mostly introduce you to the Brazilian audience.
Yeah.
So I have to sell the script, because if we start talking about beer and stuff and traveling, they will kill me afterwards. Yeah. But I will go to your podcast and then we'll talk about a lot of crazy stuff.
You guys can go follow my podcast on Spotify and review it on Apple Podcasts. That would help. That would really help. And if you do download any, I have on Amazon also a lot of the lessons and manuscripts. I call them e-manuscripts. They're ebooks, but I call them e-manuscripts because they're just a couple pages, or even my most popular one's just a 1-page prayer of Azrael, which I actually did a recording of today on the podcast. So that's fun. And I have an animator putting some animation to it. The compositor who did Monster Lab on YouTube is putting some animation to the invocation of Azrael, which is the first major invocation I wrote. So on Amazon, if you follow me on Amazon, my author page, you can get access to free downloads. Actually, every week, there's a new free download from that. It's not a soft cover book, it's just an ebook. But yeah, give some reviews. That really helps me out, because once things open up, I want to keep doing this as much as I can. But if I have to go back to some college or do something else, then it's hard to spend 10 hours a day doing classes and podcasts. But I would like to. So please support my work, and I humbly thank you. And I plan on traveling a lot more over the next 5 years once COVID has been ended by the aliens who will give us new cures and fix our whole planet. Either that or they'll eat us all.
Thank you. I'll just say goodbye to the people here and then we'll talk a little more.
Yeah.
So, if you follow us to here, and now I will speak in Portuguese again. Então, se você acompanhou a gente até agora, então não esquece, dá like, segue o canal, vai no canal do Frater, todos os links estão aqui embaixo e coloca, faz tudo aquilo que a gente já está acostumado e a gente se vê aí no próximo bate-papo Mayhem.